with the presentation this morning. So there'll be a number of people who can't make it that will like to see the presentation. And there'll be the usual protocol involved in terms of just ensuring that you behave yourself. I don't think there's going to be a problem there. But if you have questions, if you can use the chat room to follow your questions, I'll keep an eye on them, because Julia has got a set presentation she'll work through. She's not averse to taking questions on the way through, but it might be best if we try and get through that presentation and save them to the end. We've also got David Redfern, who is involved with the ACF group, but also David and I are both Rotarians, and we're Moreland Rotary got an involvement with this exercise as well. But importantly, David has had a committee role, including chairmanship of both Merri Creek Management Committee and Friends of Merri Creek for many, many years. So he is the one that's introduced the likes of Jane and Julia to us. So I'd like to get things underway and ask David if he could do the formal acknowledgement and introduce himself and introduce Julia, and let her get on with her presentation.
Thank you, Trevor. Look, firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. They are the custodians of the land on which most of us are meeting for thousands of years, and the land has deep cultural significance to them. I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on this land, that we seek to listen to them and learn to them in a spirit of reconciliation. And I'd like to also pay our respects to their elders past, present and future, and also to any other First Nations people who may be with us today. A quick word from one of our sponsors, Rotary, to which I belong. I belong to a very small and active breakfast club, which, along with Trevor in Moreland. And it's a real thrill for all of us, many of us in Rotary, that at an international level, it has announced the environment as an area of focus, along with others such as water, health, social, economic development. And it's with great excitement that Rotarians, and I spot Marie Gerard there, we're both on a task force in our district, to try and encourage Rotary clubs to engage with the environment through practical activities and also through seeking partnerships. So I just thought that little plug for Rotary I should put there, because that is a truly exciting development in our great organisation. But look, today's a day to learn about a wonderful citizen science program that we've got in our own backyard. Citizen science is an absolutely phenomenal way for members of the community to connect with and better understand the natural world. It's for our own knowledge and pleasure, but also to contribute to the well-being of the natural environment, because it helps build an evidence base, and which then helps us to further care and protect our environment. And it also is a very valuable for complementing the work of professional scientists. We certainly don't see it as competition with professional scientists, but something that complements it, so that we all have a better environment through the understandings and the connections and the learning that we get from it. But it really now gives me great pleasure to introduce Julia, who's part of this great citizen science program, who's Water Watch, which is really our very own community. And it's an absolute delight to have her here today to tell us all about it. And just briefly, Julia is, this title I picked up today, Water Watch and Rapid Response to Litter After Rainfall Coordinator, which is a magnificent title. I love it. And has been with the Merri Creek Management Committee for 4 years. Julia also has a teaching background and has taught for periods in schools in the north. And she was also worked for local government, I think where we may have first crossed paths, but working at Banyule for 7 years. So somebody who really knows this area and really knows, has an awful lot of experience to share with us. She's going to discuss the current water quality, pollution and its major inputs, what's we as a community are doing and can do to reduce pollution levels, and how we can be involved in important waterway ecology and citizen science work, even during the current restrictions. So look, Julia, it's over to you to tell us about litter and frogs and no doubt many other things. Thank you.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. Thank you to ACF today for inviting me along. So I'm looking forward to talking to you all. I'm just going to bring up my presentation here so you can see it. Yep. Just a slight correction on my introduction. I actually do have a Master of Teaching, but I have yet to be leashed onto classrooms. So one of my next things to do in my career, really, is the next step, I suppose. But everything else was true. So welcome, everyone. It's great to see you here. It was so hard when I spoke to Trevor and David about what do you want me to talk about. There were so many things that I could focus on. So, Trevor's probably going to have to cut me off in some spots because I tried to make it 25 minutes and I struggled. So we'll see how we go. There's so much going on that I found it really difficult. So I look forward to sharing that all with you. So this is what I was going to focus on today, the current ecological health of the Merri and Moonee Ponds Creek, like a general overview, and I'll be looking at some of the strategies that stakeholders have written. The main point source pollutants that we currently see that I'm sure all of you that are here are probably quite familiar with, and the role that Merri Creek Management Committee, Friends of Merri Creek and the community, and there are many other groups such as the Friends of Moonee Ponds Creek, of course, as well. There's many groups and community individuals playing a role to improve the creek ecological health, in conjunction with the stakeholders that David mentioned before as well. There's so much going on, but still so much to do. Some of you might recognise that photograph on the left. That's actually the lovely Moonee Ponds Creek, right near my house in Brunswick West, actually. And you can see, obviously, a lot of the issues that we're sort of facing, that channelization going on there, that's that concrete that's apparent in so many parts of the Moonee Ponds Creek. And it's really exciting to know that the Moonee Valley Council and Moreland Council have a 50-year plan for the Moonee Ponds Creek. But I was really excited to read some of that, but then also a bit like, 50 years. So, it just shows you it's a long time to try and reverse some of the things that have happened over the last 50 years, I suppose. So just a bit about river and creek conditions in general. This report's a little bit old now, the Port Phillip and Western Port Regional Health River Strategy from 2007, but it's still pretty relevant. Analysis back then showed that 25% of rivers and creeks in Melbourne are in good or excellent condition, and 75% are in moderate to very poor. And the results really reflect the land use patterns. So there's probably, unfortunately, it's been over 10 years since this report was written. It's probably more like 20% of rivers and creeks are in good or excellent position now, most likely. I really like this map because I am a geographer, but what I really like about it is that it shows really clearly the correlation between, unfortunately, urbanisation usually goes hand in hand with poor water quality. So you can see at the legend down the bottom, the key, you've got the index of river condition, which basically is a rating. They take in a number of things such as, is there presence of macroinvertebrates, what biological life is in the rivers and creeks? What are the physical chemical parameters like, the salinity, the nutrients, the oxygen? Is there habitat on the beds and banks of the creek? What's the hydrology look like? And they put that all together in a rating. So you can see excellent is a dark blue line, and it goes right down to very poor, which is red. Now, the other thing on this key you can see is urban areas is a pink colour. So if you have a look then at the map at the Port Phillip Bay, you can see, this is the Port Phillip Bay catchment that we're looking at, obviously, in Melbourne, that all the pink area, pretty much everything that's in the pink area is red. So very poor. There are some exceptions. You can see some green areas in some sections of the Yarra River. And obviously in our catchment areas like just northeast of Warburton where we have closed catchments. So those areas are looking quite good. But unfortunately where we have a lot of our urban areas, usually the creeks are very poor condition, which is quite a sad state of play really. And I think that's our challenge, in the next decades is, well, why does it have to be that way? Just because you live in an urban area, does your creek have to have a very poor index of river condition? Does it have to be that way? I got some more maps because I love them. This is from the Melbourne Water, a much more recent report from last year, co-designed catchment program for the Maribyrnong catchment, and there's also one on the Yarra catchment, and some of you here might have been involved in that. There was a lot of community consultation on these particular plans that Melbourne Water did. And it's got some really excellent maps. This is actually the Moonee Ponds catchment, so Moonee Ponds Creek. It's really interesting. You can see most of the catchment area with the creek in green flowing through the middle is urbanised, highly urbanised. There's some spots sort of north of Greenvale around Oaklands Junction that are currently not as highly urbanised, but the pink areas in this map, or the sort of bone coloured, are for future urban. So there's obviously going to be more happening. One of the other things in the key that's quite interesting, it's got a couple of lines. Dark green is the high quality vegetation to maintain. So what's already existing there to maintain, where the highlighted sort of green highlight is vegetation buffers to establish or maintain. So you can see there's not really, I've had a good look, unless anyone can tell me if they can see it, there's not really any dark green lines at all. There is no high quality vegetation to maintain. And everything that's been put back is probably put back by community, but there's still a long way to go. And I guess it depends on what they've classified as high quality vegetation as well. But some of the other things that the report talks about is the major threats to the Moonee Ponds catchment, which most of you will be quite familiar with, and it's very similar for the Merri catchment. And I'll go through some of these in a bit more detail. So pollutants and sediment, pest plants and animals, rapid urbanisation, climate change, modifications and diversions to the actual hydrology of the stream itself, intensity of stormwater and litter. These are some of the things from that same co-design plan that sort of show you a bit more about the key values. And it's quite interesting because they've sort of got in grey boxes up the top the current state of these values, the current trajectory, if the management that's happening now continues and it's not increased, or no more funds are put in and no more work's put in. But then a target of if we can get the resources to continue to improve things, what that value will look like. So I'm not going to go through all of them, but I just wanted to mention some of them. The top one's interesting. Birds in the riparian area is moderate, and if we continue with the current management, they'll actually decrease. So obviously we've got to do more in those areas. Fish as well are very low at the moment. I mean, I think for both the Merri and Moonee Ponds Creek, the main fish species are introduced fish, such as carp and redfin and mosquito fish. So again, much more work needs to be done for suitable in-stream and riparian habitat for fish. Frogs as well is very low. It was low at the moment, and if we don't do more, will become very low. Other than in some protected areas. And I know Anna and others here are probably quite familiar with frogs. And the thing, I guess, a lot of our frog species in the Merri Creek and the Moonee Ponds is there's very few of these populations of frogs that are there that are living in the main stem of the stream. There are some pockets up on the northern parts of the Merri Creek, but most of the frogs that are living there that you've got a good population are normally in protected wetlands. So they're not actually in the main stem of the creek, unless it's sort of slower water and sort of moved into sort of like a billabong, I suppose, and has a bit more protection. Along with frogs, macroinvertebrates and platypus are low or very low. So that biological life at the moment is quite low. And if you don't have macroinvertebrates, you're not going to get all these other animals I've just talked about, fish, birds and platypus, because that's their main food source. Platypus need half their body weight of macroinvertebrates a day to eat. And that's just currently probably not available for them in either Merri or Moonee Ponds Creek. So that's quite sort of depressing looking at that. But what we've got really strong in both the Merri and Moonee Ponds Creek is the amenity and the community connection and recreation values. So people really value the Merri and Moonee Ponds Creek. And I think we've seen over COVID how much, it's almost loving to death. We've seen in some of the media releases lately as well. But we can also harness that, and it has been harnessed by a lot of community groups over the last couple of decades. That people love it. Well, let's get them to do good things for the creek, and continue to improve people's knowledge and educate the younger generation. So we've got those great things we can continue to harness to improve things. Just a couple of things about the Merri Creek, same report. This is the upper reaches, and it's just a nice comparison. At the moment, it's not without its issues, obviously, in the upper part of the Merri, but you can see just a quite difference. There is actually some high quality vegetation still in certain areas, and a lot of landholders have actually helped keep those high vegetation corridors open. So it's thanks to a lot of landowners in those areas. Unfortunately, some of these areas are changing. Beveridge and Wallen are having more urbanisation. There's more housing planned to go in, and some sections will look a bit more like the southern part around Craigieburn as well. But as long as we recognise that there are these really important vegetation areas to look after and continue to do, a lot of this has been greyed out for stormwater priority areas. So there's lots of areas where they're trying to really treat and manage the stormwater better. Hopefully things will, look a lot better than they have in the southern parts of this area of the creek. One other thing I want to mention in the key here, you can see that sort of khaki green colour. That's Growling Grass Frog Conservation Reserve. So there's a number of spots that they've put aside to be for growling grass frog, which is one of our threatened frog species. They need quite deep water, and they need quite a lot of good vegetation cover. So they have quite a lot of conditions that they need to survive, and they're a pretty amazing frog. So it's really good to see that there's some areas set aside for them, and we know that they are occurring in some sections of the Merri Creek. Merri Creek has very similar issues to Moonee Ponds Creek as well. And this is the lower section of the Merri Creek. So you can see quite a difference to that map I just showed you before. Highly urbanised, no high quality vegetation to maintain, a little bit of vegetation buffers to increase, but it's definitely highly urbanised. So there's quite a lot of, I guess, issues there, and those are the things that we've had to contend with for a number of years. I won't go through this because it's quite similar, but this is a very similar sort of values that the Moonee Ponds Creek has. It looks pretty similar. Birds are actually just a bit better, and there's high hopes, I suppose, for birds and fish to improve them in the Merri Creek. But you can see macroinvertebrates and platypus scores are very low and probably will continue to be low. But again, the community response is very high, which is that's where our power is, I suppose. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the water quality issues in Melbourne. So some of these pictures here are around stormwater. So I'm going to focus first starting about our urban issues with stormwater. So as probably a lot of you are aware, all our drains on our streets, in our activity centres, in our shopping centres, at our schools, collect water to move it off our streets so we don't get the flooding. It goes very quickly into our waterways, into our creeks and rivers, and ends up in the Port Phillip Bay. So that's a nice, lovely photo up the top left there of the Port Phillip Bay after quite a high turbidity or mud event, high sediment event. The one on the right is actually detergent. So that's another issue that we have with a lot of our creeks in Melbourne, people washing their cars, perhaps on their driveway or on the street, and all of that detergent ends up in the creek. We also get a number of shops and businesses like to sweep out their or hose out their shop at the end of the day, especially in those shopping strip malls, and all of that detergent ends up down the creek as well. So I think there's still obviously a lot of education that needs to go on, and a lot of enforcement in certain areas. Both these things are highly toxic for a lot of our fish and macroinvertebrates and bird life, particularly the detergents. Another issue that we have with stormwater pollution, of course, is litter, which we're all quite familiar with here today. About 60,000 truckloads of litter, and about 50% of that's cigarette butts and other pollutants enter our waterways each year via the stormwater systems. And the majority of the litter that most of us are finding, those of us that are collecting data on litter, the majority of it is plastic. So, for example, the majority of the litter picked up by the community within the Merri Creek catchment was soft plastic from the 2018 to 2020 when we've been collecting data. And most of it's, plastic bags broken down, and food packaging, that kind of thing. So the picture down the bottom there is paint. So that was actually from a printing press. So there is still those occasional, and sometimes they happen more often than we'd like to, spills of pollution coming in from different industries that for some reason there's been a spillage, and that's ended up in our creeks as well. And I must say Jane does an excellent job, Friends of Merri Creek, on the Friends of Merri Creek Facebook page, when people report things to remind them to please report them to the EPA so they can follow them up and do some enforcement. But unfortunately, there seems to be a lot more of these spillages happening than we can always trace back to where they're coming from, because our stormwater drain system is so extensive. So it can be difficult sometimes to find out where's this come from. And we're dealing with that with litter as well. We've been collecting data on the litter, and we're trying to work out where is it coming from, and that can be quite difficult to figure out. Another issue that we have on our waterways is weeds. So weeds can take over certain areas. They can adapt to the more harsh conditions that some areas have, which it means there's loss of habitat. There's less habitat for the local plants and animals that we want to be able to survive there. Some weeds have drastic effects on the riparian system, on the hydrology. So they can actually, like things like willows, can actually change the flow. They can actually make the river bend and meander around in different ways in a much quicker way. They can build up silt as well, and so create sort of hills of silt in certain areas where you might need deep pools. So certain fish species, some of our native fish species, need quite deep pools to breed, as do our frogs. Growling grass frogs need quite deep areas to breed and to live. So if you've suddenly got banks of silt, they can no longer live there. Other things that weeds can do also is shading out of ground level as well and in stream, and take over those areas of in stream where we would have had some native vegetation that frogs and fish and other species would have fed on. They are no longer there anymore. And a lot of weeds take over areas in stream, and they actually take up a lot of the oxygen that's in that river system as well. So that oxygen is no longer available for in stream animals. Another issue that we get is bed and bank erosion. Some of this comes from, a lot of it comes from stormwater, the drains taking the water off the streets, as we've mentioned. Due to climate change, we're getting rainfall events that are much more extreme. So there's less of them, but when they do come, they're quite heavy, and that means the velocity, the flow of the creek is quite fast. So that then shoots into the drains and it comes out. We've got lots of outputs coming when you're in an urban area. A lot of outputs are put in to the creek system to move that water off the streets really quickly. So that results in a heavy rainfall event. It can shoot into the creek really quickly, which means you get undercutting. So you get beds cut away over time. As that water comes in, it's quite a strong thing. So you can see that picture on the left. That's actually a small tributary on the Yarra, actually Salt Creek in Rosanna Parklands, and the three volunteers there are standing over an area that's been really severely undercut. You can see that poor eucalyptus tree behind them barely holding on, all its roots exposed there, and the three of them are basically standing on almost bedrock. There's just no organic matter, no topsoil left there at all. So that's a really hard area to try and rehabilitate as well and bring back habitat. And of course what happens is the creek just continually grows and grows and grows until you've got hardly any creek left, and that's a big issue in urban areas. We already have a lack of open space. There's not more areas for it to move out. It's a really difficult one. The one at the bottom here is talking a bit about, I guess, inappropriate development. So this particular private school has been built right on the edge of the Yarra River, but probably before, as it was being built, or just before that, the Yarra River in that section was probably a little bit going in. It wasn't as exposed, I suppose, but over time, as we've had those high rainfall events, you're getting more and more undercutting. So it almost appears as if that building is right on the edge, and you do wonder in the next decade or so what's going to happen to the foundations of that building. So yeah, inappropriate development is still a really big issue, and it's one that Friends of Merri Creek and MCMC and other groups do go to VCAT quite often to advocate for really thinking about how does some of this development, how should it be along our rivers and creeks. That some of it's still quite too close to our the banks of our rivers and creeks, and causes a lot of problems as well. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about data. We collect a lot of it, and it's really a good thing to use. Because it provides some really good evidence of these changes. A lot of us can see it anecdotally as we walk along the rivers and creeks, but it's not until you actually have that physical data that you can actually say for certain and convince others, more importantly, what changes are actually going on. So I've had some great Melbourne University students this year put together this graph that you can see here, which is actually on the turbidity versus rainfall in the Merri catchment. So you can see that top picture is actually of the Merri Creek during a high turbidity event. And the graph itself, what the students were looking at was what's causing this turbidity? And one, I guess, hypothesis was, well, maybe it's just the rainfall. We're getting more rainfall, so because we have more rainfall, it's picking up more soil and other impurities along our catchment, and it's bringing it into the creek. If you have a look at that top orange line, the straight line is the trend line. You've got the data sets there from the Bureau of Meteorology, that's their rainfall data over the last 6 years. So we've started from 2014 to the present. And you can see the trend line is showing there hasn't been a huge change in rainfall over the last 6 years. It's sort of stayed around the 50 millimetres, 50 centimetres looks like in this key, average over the 6 years. But if you have a look at the bottom line, which is the blue line, the turbidity, you can see this was about 5,000 data sets the students looked at. It was WaterWatch data, it was data from DELP, it was data from Melbourne Water, data from universities, wherever they could get it from, on turbidity taken, so the muddiness of the water taken on the Merri Creek in different sections all over the creek. And you can see clearly, looking at that trend line, that turbidity has increased quite significantly. So what you want, an excellent reading is under 10. That's what, for good water quality, you want under 10 NTUs. That's what that scale is reading in there, or naphthalene turbidity units. You want around 10 to 15. And, you know, most of the time, Merri Creek is quite clear. We don't use, we didn't used to have a lot of problems with turbidity. But you can see over the last 6 years, it has climbed quite steadily to having a lot more events where it's over, over 20. We're getting up to, averaging 30 or 40, which if you have that turbidity for a longer period of time, if it goes on for weeks and weeks, that has a hugely detrimental effect on the aquatic life in the creek. So we can really quite safely say, well, it's not just from rainfall that we're getting high turbidity, it's obviously a lot of other human activities that are going on, and the things that we're putting in place to try and reduce that turbidity are not working at this stage. More needs to be done. Some of the other issues, loss of in-stream habitat. Some of you are probably familiar with that picture at the top, the beautiful Moonee Ponds Creek and all its lovely concrete. So obviously not having any habitat in-stream or on the banks does have an impact on the water quality. The quality of the water is not as good, and you're not going to get a lot of those animals we're talking about. You're not going to get that macroinvertebrates, you're not going to get fish, you're not going to get platypus, and it's also just not a really nice area to be in, really. It's quite an unattractive area to be in. And of course, with climate change, and we're getting hotter summers and more sunlight and more heat, you can imagine how hot this area would get in summer. And the creek is sort of just through the bottom there, going through there, how hot the temperature of that water would be. And of course, you're only going to get certain pest fish and other animals that can actually withstand those hot temperatures and that lack of oxygen and that no shade. So you're just not going to have that biodiversity anymore. One of the other things I wanted to mention just briefly was around presence of barriers to fish migration. So I'll just go to the next picture here. This is actually Coburg Lake, which many of you are probably familiar with the dam wall up there. So there's a lot of these dam walls still on the Moonee Ponds and Merri Creek and other waterways around Melbourne. And of course, they cause a big problem for our flow. So they reduce the flow, they reduce the oxygen in our rivers and creeks, and they also mean that fish can't migrate. So if we want to have a lot of our native fish in our rivers and creeks, we could certainly introduce them, but if they can't breed, then obviously we're going to have to constantly restock them. So we need ways to actually get fish moving up and down our rivers and creeks, because some of them rely on moving up and downstream to actually breed. So you can see in this first picture, this is actually a fish ladder that was put in, that's sort of, on the side of the Coburg Lake. I don't know, maybe someone can talk about this when we get to the discussion. I don't know if there's been any studies released on how effective this has been. Has this been working? I don't know. I haven't had an opportunity or a chance to look for any research on this, and I know they're putting in a number of these fish ladders in our urban streams, but I'd love to hear more about how successful they've been. The other thing that in that report I showed you, Melbourne Water, that co-design report, there's actually plans to remove a lot of fish barriers. So that's really great, but some of them are not planned for a few decades. So there's a lot to go and it's very slow moving. So that was all a bit depressing, but I wanted to now talk about some of the solutions because there's some really awesome things going on. I wanted to just sort of finish with that. This picture here is of the Merri Creek and the upper reaches around Merriang. So this is a landholder property they've been very heavily involved in land care and other community work over the years. And you can just see what a beautiful section of the Merri Creek this is. Look at all those great inputs that it has. It's got river red gum, so it's got lots of shade and older trees, so it's got lots of habitat, obviously, for the arboreal mammals and birds and others in its treetops, and lots of shade for the creek when it needs it. And then you've got lots of in-stream vegetation. You can see water ribbon in there, and there's a few other species as well, and some lovely deep pools as well. So that's great breeding habitat for fish and frogs. You can also see the stony knoll in the foreground, those basalt rocks. So that's a really important ecological vegetation community as well, the stony knoll grasslands, which are fast disappearing. So it's thanks to some of these amazing landholders that have really looked after an area, made sure they haven't removed the trees and kept these sort of slow meandering sections of the Merri Creek that mean that we really have an idea of what things look like, what they should still look like. And this is what a lot of our ecological restoration team at Merri Creek, this is what they use. This is where they'll go and collect their seeds. And this is what they would use to say, well, this is what it should look like. This is what we should be starting to put back in where we've lost it, where it's possible. So some of the things, of course, water sensitive urban design that a lot of stakeholders, our stakeholders and land managers are putting in to our urban areas that will slow the water down. So this is a great diagram. It really shows clearly that the rain and stormwater pollution rush down the street gutter into these rain gardens, and these rain gardens are full of gravel, sand in layers, and you've got your plants planted in the top there. So they trap the water, they basically slow it down. As I mentioned, the velocity and the sedimentation in the water are the main problems, and this sort of tackles both of them. It slows the water down so it infiltrates really slowly through the gravel and sand, ends up instead of just quickly, in minutes, it takes hours or days to actually get down to this little slotted pipe, and then it'll flow down into the local river or creek. The plants also will trap things like plastics and microplastics as well, and as long as they're maintained, as long as someone comes along and actually sucks out all that stuff that they collect, they work really well. So they're a really excellent way of slowing down our water and also trapping a lot of the sedimentation that's in it. I just wanted to mention down the bottom here, and you can Google it, the City of Darebin have a Stormwater Savvy interactive map. So they've actually showcased a number of the different rain gardens and water sensitive urban design that they've put around their council. So hasn't got everything, but it's got a number of them that you can, if you're into this sort of thing, which I certainly am, can go and check them out and see how where they're sort of situated. And they're putting in, like most councils, more and more all the time. So there's lots of examples of this water sensitive urban design. You've got rain gardens, as I mentioned. People obviously can build them in their houses as well in their gardens. Melbourne Water has some excellent instructions on how to put a rain garden in. And I've also noticed Gardening Australia you can get it on YouTube. They have an instruction video on how to make a rain garden in your backyard. There's also tree pits. Tree pits are put in. They're like rain gardens, but they're much smaller. So they're for like sort of busy activity centres, like shopping strips and things, where you might not have the room for other things. But if you've got the room, you can put things in like swales or constructed wetlands. And constructed wetlands are great because you can also have the habitat there as well. You can increase the biodiversity of an area as well. And they just create a really nice amenity. They're nice part of the open space for people to walk around as well. Some of the other things that have been happening as well with the community, we might not be able to put in water sensitive urban design, but we can do things like collect litter and report to our stakeholders and to the community on what the data is telling us. So I mentioned before about plastic. This is data collected by volunteers as part of the Rapid Response to Litter After Rainfall program that we've been running for the last 3 years. And you can see that this data analysis was put together by a group of Melbourne Uni students I had with me. And I noticed Wei was here today. So Wei, who's in this group, was one of the people that put this together. So I really thank a lot of my Melbourne Uni students and other students that I have come and helped me, because I certainly don't have the time to put all this data together. but it's so crucial because if we're not telling people what's there, how can we create change? So you can see here, the top 4 litter items are all made out of plastic, you know. There's a bit of metal, scrap metal in the middle, and then there's plastic drink bottles, and then we've got plastic non-foil wrap. Then we get down to straws, confection sticks, cigarette butts and filters. So most of the litter we're getting is plastic. Now, this isn't directly from the stormwater drain itself. This is what had been collecting on the beds and banks. We don't really encourage people to collect litter straight in the stormwater drain because you'd have to put waders in and actually get in the water, which is not very safe. So this is what's been collecting, and sometimes for weeks or months has been sitting in situ just on the beds and banks of the Merri Creek. So it's obviously an ongoing problem. We don't really look at microplastics. This is things larger than sort of a centimetre or 2, but it really gives you an idea of the extent of the problem. Some of the other things that we collect data on, citizen science is pretty much what I do in my role. And there's so many programs now, isn't it? I'm sure most of you are quite familiar with them that are here today. There's just so many, and most of you probably had a go at a few of them. So there's frog census that you can collect. There's great maps. I was just talking to Whittlesea Landcare the other night, and I was showing them maps that you can now download of the data, and they've actually put data in since the 70s. So you can look at data from the mid-70s of frog species, and we now need data though to compare it. So a lot of the areas, this is up in the Whittlesea, so the upper catchment of the Merri, we don't have any more recent data. Some of it's not been collected since the early 2000s. So I think there's definitely a gap there for people to go into some of these areas and record the data. What's going on now? We had, a certain amount of frog species on the Merri, 20 years ago. Are they still there or not? And now that we have that evidence from the past, we need to add the evidence from the future to see where we're currently at. So that's quite. I love looking at those maps. It's quite fascinating. Of course.
Julia,
yes.
Trevor.
I know we're running out of time, aren't we?
No, we are at risk of running out of time for questions. How much more time do you need to complete?
I think I'll just finish on this slide. I just had a little bit about biodiversity, but I can stop. I'll just talk on the water. So I'll just talk for about 2 more minutes and then I'll stop. Yep. Okay. Cool. Great. Yeah, no, I knew it was going to be a problem, so thanks.
No, that's all right. We've had in one of the previous presentations, we covered biodiversity. Let's see. Good.
I'll just finish with these. So we've also got the Water Watch portal, which collects all the water quality data. Some of it I shared with you today, like that turbidity data. That's available for anyone in the community if you want to know what the water quality is like in the Merri or Moonee Ponds Creek or any creek in Victoria where people are collecting data. It's all done by volunteers. You can go online and get that. Litter Watch Victoria is a new Litter Watch portal that people can access the data as well. iNaturalist and the ALA and Birds Australia collect data on biodiversity, so particular species, and some of you might have been involved obviously in recently the Birds in Backyard study. And of course then there's the water bug blitz, so that's collecting data on those great little guys down here, the water bugs. So I run 2 community sessions each year in spring and autumn. That's the optimum time that water bugs are active, and we go out into the Merri Creek up the top here, as you can see, sections on the Merri Creek to collect the data. Be really interesting to include the Moonee Ponds Creek in the future, perhaps. I don't think there's any data collected there at the moment, but really good idea to have we're really basically collecting data to see what bugs are occurring here now, comparing it with the past and also into the future, so we know where to focus our energies, I guess. So that's something that people can be involved in. We train you in identifying the water bugs and helping with the collecting the data. The only last thing, this is the last thing, promise Trevor, this is the last thing I want to mention, that, and we'll send these slides out. I'm happy to send these out after presentation anyway. Sure. This is the water quality info that you can access. So the Water Watch portal I mentioned, all the volunteers I work with have put together summaries, so that's what that is down the bottom, of the data they've collected, and more importantly, telling you what that means. So you've got the parameters, but what do they actually mean? What is good river health for, say, dissolved oxygen, and are we getting it in this areas that they're collecting data? So they're all available on the Merri Creek Management Committee website. EPA also has citizen science projects and Yarra Watch, and summer water quality reports. So you can go and look at their website to see during the summer, should I be swimming in the Port Phillip Bay? Their beach watch is really important, and they have a Yarra watch as well. Though I have noticed over the last couple of years there's less data available. They seem to be scaling it back a bit for some reason. DELP also has a water measurement information system that you can collect data. Of course, there's the frog census data, litter watch data. And I'm working at the moment with RMIT, and we're planning to put in three sites on the Merri Creek. There's going to be multi-probe sensors. So currently at the moment, the water watch groups just go out once a month and collect water quality data. We will now have sensors that will collect turbidity data. I think it's just water, temperature and light at the moment. And there's going to be one spot that's got a multi-probe, so it'll be collecting other parameters in Coburg. Basically, every half an hour, every hour. And some of those sites' community can access the data via their smartphone. So that's a really exciting project coming up later this year as well. And I'll have a webinar on the data that we find from that next year. So that's really exciting. So I'm going to stop there, Trevor, but I'll stop sharing my screen.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it was very hard for me to stop.
No, I relate to it. I quite often have the same problem. When you're passionate about something, it's quite a normal outcome. I've got a couple of questions here. One from David Redford. David had asked about the washing cars with detergents, which I think is a real issue. What can you tell us about actions that have been taken to try and educate or prohibit that type of activity?
So there's a number of I guess the main one is education, and there is some enforcement. So I have actually dobbed some people in. You can actually, if you see, not people washing their car, but say I've seen painters, house painters actually washing their brushes just down the drain, and you can see that paint going down into the drain and into the creek. So you can actually contact your local laws officers at council, and that's actually enforceable. You've got to catch them in the act actually to do that. So it's got to be quick. But if you see that happening regularly and you know what business it is, you can certainly report it. As into detergents and washing cars, the main tool I guess we have in our toolbox is education. So that's why I mention it pretty much any time I talk about stormwater, I talk about washing your cars. And particularly to schools. So I do a lot of schools education. So I talk to the kids about how do your parents wash their car. And obviously giving those solutions around going to a car wash. Most of the car washes now have triple interceptors where they actually clean and treat the water and reuse it. So going to one of those places is pretty important. Or washing your car on grass and using a phosphate-free car wash detergent so that the water will trickle through the soil and end up in the creek that way. And obviously if you're using low phosphate-free detergent, you're going to have less of those nutrients that are causing those problems.
All right. Look, the next question is from your good friend Damien. He's asked about...
hard at work there. Good on you, Damien.
Yep. His question is, Julia, when picking up litter from creek, what priority should we apply? Plastics the worst, so should they be removed? You might like to add to that, do you?
Yeah, I would. Just to maximise the ecological benefit of a finite amount of time litter picking, want to take the stuff that's doing the most harm first. What do you recommend?
Probably the smaller pieces. Obviously, macro and micro plastics are probably the biggest issue. Anything that's plastic is probably the biggest issue. But it's all pretty bad. I suppose if you had to pick, say if you saw cardboard and there was a whole lot of plastic, you'd choose the plastic, for example, I suppose. Plastic is probably the worst thing. If there's any organic... Oh, sorry, go on, Damien.
Within plastic, I've got this piece of crumbling foam that looks pretty awful, like it's really going to spread itself a lot, whereas a plastic bottle's going to take a long time to split up into pieces.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, that's probably a good point. Something that's going to bust up into a million pieces is probably more important than something that you could probably come back and pick up later. That's going to keep its shape for longer. I hadn't thought of that. That's a good point. Polystyrene is also a big issue. I should have mentioned that too on our rivers and creeks. Yarra River Keepers have just done a webinar that you can watch, and they've done a report they've done a research on polystyrene as well. So that's a good one to check out as well.
Thanks.
Sure,
Good work, Damien. Awesome.
Julia, the next question is from you to the rest of us. You're asking, you might like to elaborate it. You're you're interested to get any feedback you could on the effectiveness of fish ladders. So do you want to elaborate on that and ask anyone, perhaps if anyone's got a comment they can make?
Yeah, that'd be great if anyone's got any extra information. So we just have, I know we have a fish ladder on the Merri Creek in Coburg Lake, and there's a fish ladder also at Dights Falls where the confluence of the Merri Creek and the Yarra meet. And there's probably other fish ladders that I'm not aware of. Just wondering if anyone knows of any reports or data that's been released on how successful or not successful they've been. Anyone
make a contribution? It seems like it's...
I'll have to keep searching. Not that I've searched that hard yet, but it's just something that's been on my mind was, yeah, how effective are they? Like, they sound like a great idea. And I know there's been studies done in regional areas on them, particularly on the Murray and the Goulburn, but and other creeks and rivers. But I just wondered about, Melbourne. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a fellow that I know from Ceres, our ACF group meets at Ceres, and he's part of the Ceres group. He's worked in this area. I should ask him. His name is Nick. What's his last name, David?
Nick Kermai or Kermie?
Yeah, that's right, Kermai. Yeah.
Yeah, his brother. I know quite well as well. Tim, he's with Native Fish Australia. You're right, they're probably the people I should ask. So Native Fish Australia are pretty good too.
I think Nick comes more from an engineering background, the design of these sorts of things. Anyway, any
Thank
questions?
you. I'll follow up with them.
Yeah. Anyone got any questions they'd like to put? Peter, go for it.
Yeah, thanks, Trevor, and thanks, Julia, for a terrific presentation, and to Wave for giving you some help along the way. I follow the rewilding kind of movement in the UK. People trying to reintroduce iconic species like the beaver and the wild cat in Scotland and so on. I noticed the fairly depressing prospect you had for platypus and that sort of thing in the Merri. Do you see any kind of hope for a kind of rewilding strategy, maybe to kind of galvanise public opinion further?
I think that's an excellent idea, Peter. I would certainly be supportive of that. Perhaps that's what it needs. Perhaps the platypus in the Merri and Moonee Ponds Creek needs a specific target by a community group, perhaps to target it. I think there's just not enough resources that have been put aside for it. And obviously there's a lot of issues. All the issues I talked about today is why the platypus aren't there, because their food source aren't there. So that needs to be sorted before before platypus will come back. Platypus have been seen on the Merri Creek, obviously. There's obviously, and I'm not sure about the Moonee Ponds Creek. Maybe someone can mention about the Moonee Ponds, but the Merri Creek, they do. You notice now and then a platypus will swim up from the Yarra River, because they'll swim up from the Yarra, but there's just no food for them, so they'll just turn around and go back. So they just can't maintain a population at the moment due to lack of food source. So perhaps that's what it needs. Perhaps it needs a task force specifically around raising that issue about platypus, and maybe some sections on the creeks could be put aside for rewilding, and then if the bugs increase in those areas and the platypus is able to get there, then you might have some a viable population.
Julia, I've noted that.
Great question.
I've noted that for our follow-up discussion that we're going to have over the next week or so, when we're going to have a look at, say, some specific projects that we could engage, not only members of the ACF community group, which we've got quite a number, but other community groups, whether they be Rotary or whatever. So I'll put that down as one for us to have a discussion on.
And we could certainly invite Melbourne Water, because I know Dr. Tiana Preston she's a Water Watch coordinator as well, but she's got a big focus on platypus, and she's been doing a lot around the Belgrave area, sort of southeastern suburbs and in the upper Yarra. So people like her might be good to connect with. And
you would have to think it would resonate very strongly in the community at large. So
definitely.
Anna, you wanted to ask a question.
Just a couple of things. We haven't had platypus around here, of course, but we have had some sightings of Ricali, which has been really, which has been really exciting, because I think that's another measure of a healthy, and that's where this Ricali's been spotted. It's near the nursery corner, which is going to be developed soon by Moonee Valley, which is exciting. But it's also just a little bit upstream of the concrete, so it just is a really good illustration of the difference of habitat that can happen once that bit of concrete is removed. And as you know, with the section that's going to be removed over the next years, it'll be interesting to see how the wildlife moves down into a rehabilitated section of the creek. The other thing, if you don't mind to mention, on the coming up in the next week, the 8th to the 15th of November, is Pollinator Week. So we mustn't forget the birds with the bees, and that's particularly, as I know, along Merri Creek, you've done such wonderful work with the introduction of habitat for blue-banded bees.
Yep.
But it's a good opportunity again for particularly for young kids to get involved with a really, really good citizen science project. And Pollinator Week is now linked up with iNaturalist. So if you are lucky enough to take any photographs of the insects and habitat of your gardens or local parklands, they can be uploaded and end up on the Atlas of Living Australia, which is really exciting.
That's great. And I'm glad you mentioned the Ricale, Anna, because that's right. That's another species, an iconic species. And I was just going to mention there's Platypus Spot. That's another app that I forgot to mention, that if you do happen to see Ricale or Platypus, you can put them on that app. And so then we have some of that baseline data. And I agree with Anna, it'd be really interesting to see, maybe there's a correlation, I'm assuming there might be, between the concrete, like being no Ricale and Platypus, and then the non-concreted areas of the Moonee Ponds Creek. It'd be great to see that as a, out in a map sort of thing to clearly show that, perhaps.
Good evidential-based work. I'm going to ask Merri to make a comment. She's here from Kilmore. So you would like to elaborate a little on your comment in the chat room, Merri?
Look, I'm up in Kilmore. Now, half of our creeks flow north and half of our creeks flow south here because we're right on the top of the divide. But we are at the top of the Merri Creek in Wallen, and there's groups in Kilmore and Wallen and all through Mitchell Shire that are actually quite interested in all this work and would like to cooperate a bit with you, I'm sure.
I'd love it.
There's a Wallen group that I don't know the names of them, but I know they're in touch with BEAM, which is the Mitchell Shire Environment Group.
Yep.
I'm on that committee, and I'm in the Rotary Club of Southern Mitchell, which is also looking for environmental.
Oh, okay. Yep. I see what the problem is. Sorry, Merri. Unfortunately, you go on, and I'll tell you why. There's nothing going on with me there at the moment, but you go on.
I know where the source, certainly Wallen with all its building and the areas down from Wallen are a big part of the silting up of what's going on down further in the Merri Creek, and probably the rubbish. There's a few of us do rubbish collection in the creeks.
Great.
There's a lot of room for cooperation here.
Yeah, definitely, especially with the litter. We'd love your data. So because we don't have much data on, I didn't have time, but I've got some maps on where the data on litter currently is, and we don't have any in the upper reaches of the Merri. So it would be really nice to get some more data from the upper reaches. One of the things I guess I haven't been able to work with your groups is Shire of Mitchell don't currently fund my program. So if I don't get funding, I can't work with those groups. So unfortunately it comes down to a funding issue. But the litter one is a different one. I've still got a bit of money from a grant that covers the whole catchment. So there's things I can do and things I can't. So that's another thing that I try and, remind councils that I'm here, and hey, if you help fund me, I can work with those groups. So that's one of the issues as well.
Julia, it's now 11:30.
I did see there was a question from Paris. Did you see that one?
No, I missed that.
She was wondering what organisations I'd encourage us to get involved with to do hands-on conservation work. Oh, there's heaps, isn't there? So you've got Friends of Merri Creek, you've got Friends of Moonee Ponds Creek. There's heaps of them. So happy to talk more about that to Paris individually if you'd like, but there's so many groups that you can get involved. Friends of Edgar's Creek, depending on where you live, I'd probably suggest hook in with those ones. Is that helpful, Paris?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Whereabouts do you live, Paris? What part?
I live in Brunswick East, right, just around the corner from Ceres.
Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go. So you've got Ceres, you've got Merri Creek Management Committee, you've got Friends of Merri Creek, you've got the subgroup of the Merri Creek Wetlands Group. There's just heaps. Do have a look at our Friends of Merri Creek website and the Merri Creek Management Committee website. Unfortunately, a lot of things are not re-veg work's not happening at the moment with the community because of COVID, but things are slowly changing, aren't they? So hopefully we do have a Wednesday morning group that meets once a month on a Wednesday morning. And then, of course, nearly every weekend there's something you can do with the Friends of Merri Creek. There's so many activities now. So you can pretty much pick what you're interested in now, not just one, not just one thing.
And I should do a plug for ACF. So
yes,
my details are on the flyer, Paris. If you're interested in the work of Australian Conservation Foundation, as we are connecting up and doing work with Merri Creek Management Committee. I'd just like to say to everyone that what we'll do is arrange for the availability of the presentation material this morning. And as Julia said, there's a couple of other things that you weren't able to present, you'll probably include.
Yep.
And also the recording of this session. Now it is 11:32, but perhaps a chance for one final golden question. Anyone like to put forward a question? What about you, Jane? Oh no, David, go for it.
No, he's all fine. Hey, we're finished on time. That's good.
he's no one else?
Sorry, I was waving to somebody else behind me.
No, we finished on time. That's really good. I'm sure people want to get out and about on their Sunday. So thank you so much, everyone.
I was just going to ask Jane, since she had presented before, is there anything you wanted to affirm, confirm?
Just thanks, Julia, for a fantastic session with so much information, and it really helps to give people a sense of what they can do on both an individual level and to join existing groups, and just how everything is connected.
Such a good point, Jane. Wonderful. Yeah. So true, isn't it? There's so much going on. That's the thing. There's a lot of depressing stuff, but then on the other side, there's lots of really great stuff. People are like, well, we're not going to take this lying down. Let's do something about it. And there's always new projects happening all the time. Peter might start this platypus rewilding program, So, and that's what it takes. It is your own time and effort, but then you'll find other people want to join you as well. So it's all people like us. This is where it comes from. It's not from management, land managers. It's not from stakeholders. It's from people like us, isn't it, in the community that just want to do something. And that's what keeps us all going, I think, doesn't it?
So, Julia,
and we'll continue.
I can finish off by thanking you very much. What I find so useful about this morning is there's an excellent combination of education, learning, and also I love the way in which you develop thoughts around pathways for community engagement, whether it's any one of the groups that have been mentioned this morning, but you've also got means by which families and scout groups or whatever can get involved. So thank you.
Well, I think that's important, Trevor, isn't it? I think if you want anyone to be involved, you've got to make it accessible, don't you? You've got to be adaptive.
We're not here to conduct a lecture program.
I know, but we could, couldn't we?
We're here to motivate people, aren't we?
That's right. That's what it's all about, isn't it? And you've got to make it accessible. If I can't make something work for someone, I've got to think a bit more about it, because people have got enthusiasm and you want to harness that.
You're awesome. Not only for what you've done this morning, but for your hands-on leadership and example that you give to us all for what can be done in the community. Thank you. And I'll say to everyone, my own details are in the flyer. So if anyone's got any questions, just contact me. So have a wonderful day, everyone.
Have a great Sunday, everyone. See you all again.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
See you down by the creek.
Thank you. Yes. Bye.
I'll be in Bunjil Reserve.
Yes. Where's Bunjil Reserve, Trevor?
Panton's Hill.
Oh, Panton Hill. Oh, I love Panton Hill. It's beautiful up there. Haven't been there for ages.
Up there. I'm
it's lovely, Anna, isn't it?
Frog hunting. I caught up with a gorgeous family of them in Westspring Creek.
I saw your video, the growling grass frogs.
And I've got a family still about in Salmon Reserve in Essendon, and I've got a couple just down the road from me here, just a few hundred metres.
So Anna, what should I look out for in my walk around Bunjil Reserve?
Oh, Well, there's still lots of nesting birds. So I mean, the woolly wagtails and the magpie larks are still nesting. I mean, Panton Hill's really interesting. I think there'll be many here that would remember when we used to have the bell miners. Used to be a cacophony of them when we used to go to the St Andrews Market, and they, I think they never recovered from the fires that went through in 2007, I think it was. And so the bird life has changed quite a lot around there, but it's an absolutely beautiful area. I love it to bits.
Oh, enjoy your day. Was there any last things, those that are still here, that wanted to ask something before I headed off too? Nope. Oh, that's easy. Well, oh, great. Thanks, Trevor. You're going to put the presentation on the Merri Creek Management Committee and Friends of Merri Creek.
If you give them to me, I'll liaise with Louisa and Ray.
Yep.
And we're going through a process of getting the videos on YouTube. Because presently I can only access them, the big MP4.
No, yeah, it needs to go on YouTube. Yeah, I think for people to access it.
Do that, and also the slides, we'll put them in a PDF form and put them up. And we'll put them up. ACF, we've got our own Facebook page as well. So we'll ensure that the propagation of the message is effective.
We'll get there.
Okay. Nice to meet you, Paris.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much for hosting, and thanks so much, Julia. The information was amazing.
Oh, you're welcome. Did you have any other questions?
Cool. I mean, I do, but I'm overwhelmed with all my questions.
Yeah, how about you process it? But feel free to send. I can put my email address in the chat, and feel free to send me an email, and we can always have an online catch up like this, or on the phone, or an email.
Amazing.
Back and forth to tell you more.
That would be awesome. Thank you so much.
We're going to have our ACF group is going to have a catch up with Julia in a couple of weeks' time to discuss projects that we can take on. You know, like, so if you're interested in that, just let me know. So
yeah, that would be awesome. I'll grab your contact details and I'll shoot you an email.
Have you got the flyer?
I do have the flyer. Yeah, I've got it. I think I've got it on my Facebook page or put something like that.
Yeah, we'll have a look at my phone number and email address is on the flyer.
Amazing. I'll shoot you an email. That'd be great.
Cool. Okay.
Thanks, Paris.
Thanks so much, guys.
Nice to meet you. You too.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
I've got to go on my Bunjil.
Go and enjoy your walk, Trevor. Thanks for a great moderation and thank you for inviting me once again. It was fantastic.
As they say in Nepal, swagatam.
Oh, what does that mean?
You're welcome.
Oh, that's nice. Say it again.
Swagatam.
Swagatam.
It's Swagatam. Swagatam.
Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, I like it.
They generally say, if they speak in English, they don't do the you're welcome. They just say welcome. But you've got to learn that, you know, that subcontinental little nod of the head when you do it.
Yes. Thanks, Trevor. Enjoy your walk, won't you?
I will. I'll tell you all about it.
I look forward to it.
Okay.
See you later. Bye.
Have a lovely day.
You too.